Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. I am your host, Emmett Muckles, the guy named after his father who was named after his father. So there was three of us at one time. And I've been blessed to be here with you today. And today, my guest is Dr. Michael D. Lewis. I've been waiting to talk to this man because a couple of weeks ago, when we changed the clocks back, I had an episode, and it was a dark episode. And so I started reaching out for people who could help us to understand all these little maladies that we go through during the winter months. And it doesn't have to necessarily be winter months, but it could be just you're having some dark periods in your life. How you doing, Dr. Lewis?
I am doing absolutely fantastic.
You're a very accomplished man, just to say.
I'm stubborn.
You know, you seem like one of those people who sees a challenge and you say, I can do that.
Or I'm told that I can't do something and then I just find a way that I'm going to do it anyway.
That's awesome. So one of the things that I was really interested in is your take on the brain functions, the body, and how we can augment our mental and physical health and keep it kind of on the straight and narrow path and relatively on course versus having dips, highs, and lows. One of your proponents is about omega-3 protocols and treating like brain injury and fish oil, which are things that I take, and how they can help us out. And particularly, there's a story about Bobby's story. Can you delve into that a little bit?
Well, the quick story about Bobby, because it's a long story, but the quick version is that when I was on active duty in the Army, I came up with the idea of maybe we could be using omega-3 fatty acids like from fish oil to help our soldiers recover from traumatic brain injury. And so as I started to develop programs for the military, I got a little bit of a reputation. One day I get a phone call that this kid, Bobby, had been in a really bad car accident. It was March 2010. And that I think that using high dose omega-3s might help him recover. And basically the neurosurgeon was saying, pull the plug. There's no chance that this kid has any bit of survival and just pull the plug now. And the parents refused to give up and eventually got a hold of me. So I convinced the neurosurgeon to try high amounts of omega-3s down Bobby's feeding tube. And the real short of the story is 3 months later, he went to his high school graduation.
Awesome. What was that period? Was there sudden change, or was it over a period of time you started to see progression from the treatment?
Well, typically with somebody that had such a severe head injury that, you know, the parents are being told to pull the plug, you don't wake up out of a coma. It just is not like on TV. So it's a definitely gradual period. And somebody that's had a bad car accident like Bobby did, it's really a lifetime that he's going to be struggling to gain as much recovery as possible. And it was like 5 years later, he was struggling and with the paralysis from the brain injury and living in his parents' house, and just had tried to commit suicide a couple of times because he was like, what's life worth living for? And I introduced him to something new called hemp-derived CBD. Oh. And 2 weeks later, he got rid of all his medications and anxiety and moved out of his parents' house and started doing stand-up comedy for fun at night.
So I have to ask you about CBD oil because it is gaining serious momentum in the United States. I live in Indiana, which is one of I call it the Northern Bible Belt. And when I began to see it here, I was like, this stuff must be doing some really good, have some really great attributes to it. When they extract it, how does it help the body, or how does it work with the body? Does it work with the fat, or does it work with does it inhibit or manifest in the cellular structure? How does that help us with the CBD and the cannabinoid receptors?
Well, actually, you just kind of hit on it. It interacts with the cannabinoid receptors. And so there's cannabinoid receptors in our brain that make us happy and feel good. And then there's cannabinoid receptors throughout our body, particularly in our immune system, that helps keep our body balanced, in tune. And so, the more famous cannabinoid from the plant side is THC, and of course that interacts with these receptors in the brain to make you high. But when you have hemp-derived factors such as CBD, the hemp doesn't have the THC, or has to have just a trace amount of THC. But essentially, hemp doesn't have THC. CBD is the medicinal part of the cannabis plant, and it mimics what our bodies do for ourselves. The reason why we have receptors isn't for cannabis plants. It's because our body makes these own happy molecules to keep us in tune, keep us balanced. We used to call them endorphins, right? You get a runner's high. Well, that's the stimulation of the cannabinoid receptors in your brain, making you happy, making you feel good.
So a lot of people are very leery probably of CBD oil because it comes from the hemp plant. Now, the hemp plant and marijuana are two different strains of botanical items. As a matter of fact, we used to use hemp in the early part of this country's birth and up until like the early 1900s for majority of things from paper to sails to clothes, so forth and so on. How do you ease someone's mind in saying, that's drugs, I don't want to do that?
Well, number one, you hit it exactly right, is that marijuana and hemp are different strains. And in fact, marijuana is the female version of the plant, and hemp is the male version of the plant. So hemp, marijuana is grown for the flower and groomed for that. Hemp is a crop. It just grows. I mean, I said, our founding fathers all were hemp farmers: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and so on. And in fact, the Commonwealth of Virginia, before we were a country, required their farmers to grow hemp. It was such a valuable cash crop. And then it basically got thrown under the bus with marijuana in the last century. So hemp is tremendous as far as, like you said, for textiles, for rope, for medicinal. It's been used for thousands of years by every major culture in recorded human history.
So why do you think they threw this all together so that, because I've seen some amazing properties on kind of all sides of that table, from those who have had anxiety and have medical marijuana use, to those who have other ailments, such as my wife who has Crohn's, and she uses CBD oil. And she says it's made a world of difference in her. What's taken us so long to get to the CBD component?
It's taken as long to go back 4,000 years to what the Chinese have been talking about. Partly that, the reason why it's called the cannabinoid system in our bodies is because there was an Israeli researcher in the late 60s, I believe it was, maybe early 70s, and he set out to figure what is the chemical structure of THC, or what makes us high when you smoke marijuana. And he figured out what the chemical structure was with THC, but then he took the next step, was how does that interact with the brain? And that's how the receptors were discovered. And that basically, because of the way he got to it, that's why he called it the cannabinoid system. It wasn't until 1993, I think it was, that we first were able to isolate and discover that our body makes our own cannabinoids to make us happy, and so they named the first one anandamide, which literally in Sanskrit means happy or bliss molecule. So part of the reason why it's taken so long is because we didn't understand the actual chemistry of the plant, and we're still learning. I mean, more and more things are being discovered, the chemical makeup of the hemp, the cannabis, the marijuana plant, and we're still discovering, new things every day.
And with that, I know that it's CBD oil, and we know oil is not always acceptable in the body. I believe that I've seen some actual water-soluble CBD concoctions. Is there a difference between the water-soluble versus the oil-based?
Well, it's very difficult to make a water soluble, to take an oil basically and make it water soluble. So that's an engineering feat that some really smart people have figured out. So it's it's water soluble. It theoretically is better absorbed. But, we absorb oils just fine. When you talked about, interestingly enough, I have to jump back for a second. You said about your wife's Crohn's disease. Well, the biggest immune system in our body is basically with the gut, with the intestines.
Yes.
And, of course, that's where Crohn's happens. And because if you think about it, when you ingest things, there's all kinds of good and bad things going on. And if we're absorbing it into our bloodstream, there better be a good immune system there to kind of act as the gatekeeper. And that's why there's so many receptors, cannabinoid receptors in our gut. So gut health is really a huge, important thing.
Awesome. Very, very awesome. Your book, which is on Amazon, everyone, When Brains Collide, what every athlete and parent should know about prevention and treatment of concussions and brain injuries. How did you come to that? Because that's become a really, topic at the forefront in the last couple of years, generally focusing on high-level sports, and it's trickling down. What made you want to dive into that?
Well, I was active duty before I retired from the Army. My last duty station was at the Walter Reed National Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. And, there's two wars going on, Iraq and Afghanistan, and you can't be on the campus without being around wounded warriors, and you start to think, what can I do to help these guys and women and guys? And so I kind of put two and two together and came up with an odd number. And I went to the head of research and asked, is anybody looking at omega-3s to help the recovery? And the answer was no, why don't you? And basically, because I don't know anything about it. I'm not a neurologist or a neurosurgeon and biochemist or whatever. And he goes, yeah, but you're the only one asking the question.
Right.
And that was 12 years ago, actually, almost to the day now, that when I walked into the office and asked that question. And I have been fighting the system because it's nutrition. And, there's this bias against nutrition. How can nutrition help? It's not taught in medical schools. It's not a drug. How could it help? And so it's been an uphill struggle, both in the military. And then when I retired, I kind of took the fight to the world of sports and making some headway. I'm aware of several NFL football teams that all the players take fish oil every single day, as I've been saying for a dozen years now.
Wow. And you've seen the progressive benefits that help these people with just taking these supplements to aid their progression in life.
Absolutely. And, whether you're playing high-level professional football and banging your head all the time, those guys obviously need something from the inside out to protect them, not just, a better helmet. But you kind of mentioned with CBD, and we're going to mix CBD and omega-3s here up into the same bowl, of mix. CBD is great for anxiety. And interestingly enough, omega-3s also stimulate the cannabinoid system. So they have some overlap as far as how they work. And so the combination of the two is what I do now with my head injury patients. but I'm also starting to find a little bit of a following with corporate executives who just need to be able to focus better as they get older. Stressed out moms, that's really the big one. So the idea of, the little mother's helper, which was basically Valium and benzodiazepines, there's the whole segment of stressed out moms that are saying, no, CBD is what I need, and doesn't have the side effects and the addictive potential that opioids and benzodiazepines have.
My wife swears by CBD oil. Swears by it.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, because I've seen her have episodes of pain that I think we would all just give up the ghost. Be like, I'm done. I'm out. And she battles through it. And she says, when I started taking CBD oil, a lot of she said it was really weird. She was like, she didn't notice. She noticed that she wasn't having these little issues over the course of 2 weeks when she started. It was only when she stopped. And then she was like, I feel awful. Like all these little things start coming back because she had gotten used to pain. And then she found a remedy for it. But I want to ask you, are all CBDs of the same rank? How can you find a good quality CBD oil?
Well, having been around the fish oil industry for a dozen years now, there's definitely good quality and not so good quality fish oil. And the company that's really been the leader in the fish oil industry for the last 20 plus years is a company called Nordic Naturals out of California. And they really have set the standard, and everybody always compares themselves to Nordic because they really are the standard. And great products. Well, a couple of the key executives key people from Nordic Naturals actually went over to the CBD industry and have taken that same level of quality and rigor to one particular company. So there's really only two companies out there that have been around with any kind of a track record because it's such a new industry. There's hundreds of little players out there that all make these crazy, wild claims. But Charlotte's Web, which you may have heard about through the Sanjay Gupta CNN segments and stuff, that's been around the longest, and it's probably arguably the biggest company. The other one is CV Sciences and their Plus CBD Oil line of products, which they say are the best-selling retail products. And when I say retail, we're talking about hemp that you buy at your health food store or your holistic pharmacy without a prescription, without a medical card. It's not medicinal marijuana or anything like that. You buy it like a nutritional supplement. So those are really the only two companies that I trust. I'm an advisor to CV Sciences and the Plus CBD Oil line because I love their products. They're soft gels. The tiny little soft gels are like smaller than a pea. Really, you get a set dose. You know what you're getting. I know the quality behind the people and the quality behind the product. And now the FDA does too, because they actually have gotten generally recognized as safe designation by the FDA for their main line of products.
And is it legal across the United States, or are there places where it's not quite hit its tipping point?
That's a loaded question. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a doctor. It is a gray, I'm going to admit, it is a gray area. I'll run through it really quick. The 2014 Farm Bill basically said that states have the right to make the decision. They can grow hemp. They can do whatever they want within certain, pilot programs and this, that, and the other. Well, the DEA kept interrupting that. So 2016, they passed a bill that said, we're not going to fund DEA to do that anymore. So that basically helped things. Now the 2018 Farm Bill that hasn't quite made it through Congress yet, hopefully it will before the end of the year, has a hemp act in it that basically says everything hemp is legal from the federal level. The states could still do what they want, or your local sheriff could get a bug up the wrong end and decide that he wants to pull it off the shelves. And they have done that in Indiana and other places, but they always, it goes to court, and the courts have sided every single time with the retailers and against the law enforcement because it's not marijuana.
Right. And I was wondering this because there are so many different body types, absorption rates of different substances. So how can you tell how much you should take of fish oil or CBD?
Well, everybody's different. Everybody's genetic makeup is different. There's some people that don't tolerate fish oil. I mean, in some cases, it's because of some side effects of just being bad fish oil. Like if you take a fish oil and it repeats on you, fish burps, as they call it, it's not because you can't tolerate it. It's almost always because it's a bad product. So you get what you pay for there. And so good fish oil should never repeat on you. And so that's number one. So the FDA tells us what's generally recognized as safe for fish oil or omega-3s is 3,000 milligrams a day. And most Americans, through their diet, get about 100 milligrams, not 3,000. So I basically go with the FDA generally recognized as safe, kind of push the limits, say 3,000 a day. That's what I recommend. It's what my 18-year-old high school football playing, now college rugby player takes every day before, at breakfast to protect his brain from getting injured. And he's never had a concussion. So I guess I'm doing something right there. As far as CBD, it's a little bit more nuanced. That's one of the reasons why I like the Plus CBD oil soft gels is because patient compliance is really easy. Take a soft gel in the morning, take one at night. If it makes you too sleepy during the day, don't take it in the morning, take it just at night. And, it's really, you got to play with it. Everybody's dose, it's an individual conundrum that you've got to figure out. And with little soft gels, 15 milligrams, you know what you're getting. It's a really good starting point, and I adjust from there.
Awesome. That is so awesome because my wife is always saying, you should take CBD, you should take CBD. But I take a concoction of things anyway, such as vitamin D, which seriously helps my mood, vitamin E, and a couple of other things. But with the CBD, how can that also help beat like this wintertime blues with anxiety and depression, or just overall anxiety and depression that people may be feeling because of this, which seems to have been growing as of late?
It certainly has across the country, across the world probably, but certainly levels of anxiety over the last, say, 2 years have really accelerated. And I'm not even going to go there.
No, don't go there.
I'm a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. And now I'm going to tell you, I'm not a political analyst.
We'll just step off that chair.
But like I said, it's not just what you see on the news, the 24-hour news cycle and this, that, and the other. We're just bombarded. Moms are stressed out because they're dealing with kids and, dads are stressed out because they're trying to make enough money to keep the family, moving forward. Executives are stressed out because the shareholders are, pounding on their desk every quarter. So, there's a lot of stress out there. And so CBD is really my number one, absolutely number 1, 2, and 3 is for anxiety. And then, next I would say chronic pain. And that sometimes runs together. So if you can decrease the anxiety in somebody, let me tell you, they get better focus, they function better. It's like turning on the lights. So I routinely have patients say, hey, that fish oil is really good. I got some great stories of how it's changed people's lives in 2 days because I actually triple that dose up. I'd say take that dose 3 times a day for the first week. And they're like, wow, that fish oil was great, but that CBD was life-changing. Wow. And there's not too many times, and I think your wife would probably be right along this. not too many times did you give somebody a prescription for a drug and they say, wow, that was life-changing.
Right.
It just doesn't happen, but it does routinely with CBD.
Yeah, because I come from the gym, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so, like a day later, and then the day after that, you hit your peak soreness. She's like, CBD, CBD, CBD. And I've always pushed her off. I'm like, you go ahead and take it. That man thing, I'm just going to tough through it. But now, talking to you, I think I'm going to change my tune a little bit and move in that direction.
When my son was a high school senior, and he was the leading rusher in all county and all that stuff. So, I mean, he was in the thick of things. He carried the offense on his back. And, after the game, it was 4 bags of ice in the bathtub and here's your CBD. And that's basically how he made it through the season.
Wow. So if people want to find out more about what you do and everything that you're involved in, how can they find you?
Well, there's a couple of ways. The best way and the best resource is to go to Amazon and get the book When Brains Collide, and it goes into a lot of detail. I talk about why the importance of blood testing for omega-3s, for example, how to use omega-3s for prevention, how to use it after you've had a concussion. What about if your kid's in a coma with after severe trauma? What are the doses? How to talk to the doctors about it? So it's the audience is really, I wrote the book for moms, literally. I said, I want to reach soccer moms out there because moms can change the world, moms and wives. And so that's my target audience. And so When Brains Collide, available on Amazon. When I retired, I started a small nonprofit. The website is brainhealtheducation.org, brainhealtheducation.org. And I'm in a small solo practice, do consultations all around the country, but actually all around the world. And you can find me there at braincare.center, not .com, but braincare.center.
And do you do any public appearances such as talks or seminars or give people live information?
I talk at a number of medical conferences and product expos around the country, 8 to 12 times a year. State brain injury association meetings or state medical meetings. So I do a lot of public appearances, and I'm probably averaging 8 to 10 radio shows and podcasts a week right now. So
wow, you're busy.
Trying to get the word out.
You're a busy man.
Trying to get the word out.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast.
Well, it's been a great pleasure. It's hopefully we can, plenty more to explore. If you want, we can do it again sometime soon.
Actually, I want to ask you this. I touched on anxiety and depression, and particularly once we hit the darker months of the year, if you're in some kind of low vibrational state, as I like to say, or suffering some kind of seasonal depression, how long will it take before somebody could notice the difference? Is there a difference between if they just started off with fish oil, or would they see a more dramatic effect if they were using CBD oil?
Well, I think you get an exponentially better effect with the CBD, but let me just kind of demonstrate with a story. So a couple of years ago, I was dealing with the head of the industry organization for fish oil, and it's been a friend, and I said, you know what? Do what I call the Omega Protocol. So the Omega Protocol is, take that triple dose. Take a full dose in the morning, breakfast, lunch, and then again dinner. And she goes, I run the fish oil industry. I take fish oil every day. And I'm like, do the protocol. And sure enough, just like almost every time, and I've dealt with 4-star generals in the Army to the head of the fish oil industry, and usually day 2, I get an email. And in this particular case, she lived in New Jersey, and she goes, It's February in New Jersey. The sky is gray. The snow is gray. Everything sucks. And I've never been happier. And that was on day 2. She goes, I didn't know I was supposed to be this happy in February.
Let me ask you this. So because we really haven't touched on it. So for me, I get up in the morning and I have my little concoction of fish oil and vitamin D and there's one other thing. I can't remember what it is. And I take it once a day. So should it be a little bit different? Should it be parsed out over the course of the day with smaller doses or compounding the dose as to administer it to your body?
Well, if you got to remember that we're omega-3 fish oil, it's fat. And so fat accumulates in the body, and over time, it doesn't really matter. If I'm trying to make a difference in somebody, and I want to do that as quickly as possible, I kind of do a big loading dose of fish oil. Now, I do not do this with CBD. It's a whole different thing. With CBD, you've got to go the opposite. You want to start lower and work your way up. But with fish oil, most people are so deficient in omega-3s, I do a loading dose. And that's what kind of wakes people's brains up. And just 2 or 3 days, if you're going to notice an improvement, if you're going to notice a difference. But if you're taking it long term, like you should, it doesn't matter if you take it once a day or 3 times a day. It's all kind of accumulating in there just by the nature of what that does.
And that's for fish oil in particular, correct?
Correct. Like I said, CBD is very different. CBD, I definitely had to learn that lesson, but you want to start low and work your way up. You don't want to try to overload on CBD. It's not a good thing.
So what happens if you tend to overload on CBD?
Well, it's kind of like a bell curve, and you can go falling off the wrong end of that, the far end of it. And instead of relieving your anxiety, it actually can kind of overstimulate the cannabinoid system and put you into a state of anxiety.
Gotcha. That makes so much sense. Well, this has been awesome. I mean, I learned so much, and I've had CBD oil around my household for probably at least a year now. And now I'm going to...
What did I say? Wives and moms can change the world. All we got to do is get us guys to listen to them.
You know what? You're absolutely right, because my wife was so enthralled because the Crohn's brings on some other maladies that she suffers. And she said those things just said, bye-bye. And then as soon as she's out, she's a whole different... remember King Kong when he was on top of that? That's her.
Empire State Building?
Yes. When she's on CBD, it's like, all right, put the house in the garage. We're going to stay in it too. Leave mom alone. But like I said, I want to thank you so much for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle. And I pray much prosperity and that your message is carried out farther than you expect.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your prayers, and hopefully we can continue to reach more people.
Let's do it again in about 6 months.
That would be awesome. I would love that.
Yeah, this is great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know how I end the show. Remember this, when you get out the shower, first you got to go in, but then get out and drop that towel and be with yourself. Make sure your windows are closed so you don't get on any illegal list. But be with yourself, because you came into this world in that body. And you should appreciate that body, because it is a miracle. A lot of times people think the billionaire lifestyle is about money. It is the exact opposite. You are comprised of cells. 30 days after 2 cells met, they began this replication process, 2 to the power of 30. You were a billionaire, because there were at least 1 billion cells that comprised of you, and that grew from there. Remember, when you see someone with those nebulae in their head on the either side of the thing that brings wonderful life in the form of air into their body, know that they are just like you, and they want the same things you want. They want love, honor, respect, and treat them like you want to be treated, because It starts with loving yourself, and then that love spreads out. Remember, if you don't think someone loves you, think of my voice and remember this: I love you much and I respect you much. Go in peace.